On Thursday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott held a border security press briefing alongside members of law enforcement in Corpus Christi. Abbott sounded a familiar tone, slamming the Biden administration and federal Democratic lawmakers for failing to secure the southern border. Abbott focused on the deadly threat of fentanyl coming through from Mexico that has contributed to a national epidemic of drug overdoses. He's currently seeking a third term in the Lone Star State's governor's mansion and faces fierce opposition from former congressman and failed 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke. Recent polls show Abbott with a double-digit lead on O'Rourke, who remains perhaps Abbott's strongest gubernatorial challenger.
As well as of this state, and to keep our state secure. And they are putting their lives on the line every single day to ensure the safety of their communities. Most of the people with us here today are sheriffs. In addition to that, there are some police officers, and they collectively are all a part of the process of securing their communities from the overwhelming number of people and drugs and contraband that is coming across the border. A lot of people think that something that may come across the border is going to be dealt with at the border. And in some, and maybe many cases, it is. But the fact of the matter is, border challenges come up to Nueces County, to other counties across the entire state of Texas. Every sheriff in Texas is a border sheriff because of the open border policies allowed by the Biden administration. And I want to thank them for what they do, and I want to thank them for their support. This is a bipartisan group of law enforcement officials who put service to our community and enforcement of the law above everything else. There will be several talking here shortly. They include sheriffs from across a very vast region, including the Texas Sheriff's Regional Alliance, Texas Border Sheriffs Coalition, and Operation Lone Star Task Force. And we have some police chiefs as well as commanders of task force operations. Again, what they are dealing with are the consequences because of Joe Biden's open border policies. They are the people on the front lines dealing with problems every day such as human smugglers, cartel gang members, fentanyl, which is on the rise. Thousands of people have crossed the border, some of whom have previously been convicted of dangerous crimes. They're dealing with their constituents whose ranches have been ripped apart, homes invaded. And one of the sheriffs here today is having to ask for morgues because of the number of dead bodies that he has in his county. And they're constantly having to respond to fear by their constituents. Remember this, it was just 2.5 years ago. We had the fewest illegal border crossings in decades. And that's because of 4 measures that were put into place, and that is remain in Mexico, the Title 42 policy, the end of catch and release, and building a border wall. Now, just 2.5 years later, under President Biden, we, this past fiscal year, had the most illegal border crossings ever. More than 2.2 million people have come across the border because the Biden administration is not enforcing the rule of law on the border. Well, Texas has done more than any state in the history of America to respond to this challenge. We're the only state to ever build our own border wall. We have the National Guard on the border that are involved in turning back people who are trying to cross the border illegally. People who make it past them encounter the Texas Department of Public Safety, who arrest people who cross the border. And they will arrest them and jail them, or arrest them and return them to the border. To show you why this matters so much, just take, for example, a story from last week when DPS arrested a man from Honduras. And after they arrested him and processed him, they realized there was a warrant out for his arrest for murder. He was wanted for murder. And had DPS not been there to arrest him, he would have been let loose, passing Border Patrol, wandering around Texas or the United States, posing imminent danger to Texans and Americans. And then there's the fentanyl. Fentanyl that's crossing the border at unprecedented amounts. And there's a very easy explanation why. Because most Border Patrol are actually not patrolling the border. Most Border Patrol are filling out the paperwork of all the migrants that the Biden administration is allowing in. and because they're preoccupied filling out paperwork that leaves open wide gaps that cartels are able to bring fentanyl across the border in record amounts. Just Texas DPS alone has seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the entire United States of America. Had they not been there to seize that fentanyl, there's no telling how many lives would be lost. What we do know is this. This past year, we did see a record number of people in the United States lose their life because of fentanyl, the precursors of which are made in China and then shipped to Mexico, and the cartels lace it onto drugs that are then sold into the United States. Last year alone in Texas, we had almost 1,700 people who lost their lives because of fentanyl overdoses. By mere accident, just one pill is enough to kill them. More than 4 people a day in Texas are losing their lives because of it. In the United States of America, the leading cause of death of people between the ages of 18 and 45 is not COVID or cancer or car wrecks or anything like that. The leading cause of death in the United States of people in that age group is fentanyl. This is a crisis. And the only people who are really stepping up and doing anything about that crisis are the people surrounding me right now and their peers. Is Texas law enforcement that's stepping up, dealing with the crisis of fentanyl, trying their best to get it off our streets. And it's time the Biden administration take this serious and step up and secure the border and nothing else to stop the fentanyl. And while I'm talking about it, I got to remind everybody here, hopefully getting out to everybody within this viewing area, about the deadly rainbow fentanyl the cartels are bringing across the border that looks like candy, but is laced with deadly fentanyl that some kids may take and consume and lose their life because of it. Well, one thing that we did to try to fight back against these deadly cartels is I issued an executive order and a declaration that these cartels are terrorist organizations, and we intend to put them out of business. We will work in collaboration with local law enforcement as well as federal law enforcement to identify and seize any assets that either these cartels or their American side gangs have. We want them to understand if they're doing business in Texas, they picked the wrong state to do business in. They can take their business elsewhere, but we will track down their money, their homes, their boats, their cars, whatever assets they have, and put them out of business. One thing Texas recognizes is even though we've done more than ever before, we cannot do this alone. We know that it's the men and women who are on the front line, who are the tip of the spear in responding to the challenges on the border and the chaos on the border caused by the Biden administration. And that's exactly why the state legislature provided funding for local sheriffs. So sheriffs would be able to use the resources that would help them respond to the challenges they're facing in their community because of the open border policies. And to some extent, that's the same for all sheriffs. To some extent, different sheriffs need different tools and strategies. Our job as a state is to help those local law enforcement officers, our sheriffs, to have the tools they need to do their job to keep their community safe from the chaos caused by Joe Biden's open border policies. Bottom line is that we together collaborate to try to corral this open border crisis. But it's important that I emphasize this. We should not be doing this. This is not in the book that says that it's local sheriffs that should be doing this, or even a state that should be doing this. It's actually in the United States Constitution that says it's the federal government's responsibility to take care of this issue. We're big enough to step up and respond to it. But the federal government needs to get under control its assigned duty under the Constitution, and that is to secure the border. We're not going to wait on them. While they get in line to do their job, we in Texas will continue to step up and keep our state, our counties, and our communities as safe as possible. And that is possible only because of this bipartisan working relationship, where we together will make sure that we do everything we can to keep our community safe. Now I want to turn it over to your local sheriff, and that is Sheriff Hooper.
Hey, thank you, Governor, and thank you for being here. And today was a beautiful day because we got to sit around, if only for a short time, and share some intelligence, share some stories, and share some reality with the governor. And the governor mentioned that 2.5 years ago, the border was a different place. Well, I'm here to tell you that 2.5 years ago, Nueces County was a different place. 2.5 years ago, there were only 3 fentanyl-related deaths in Nueces County. 1 year ago, that year, there were 17 fentanyl-related overdoses, poisonings here in Nueces County. And just last year, there were 31. I spoke with the medical examiner this morning, and we're on a pace to beat that again this year. It's real. Nueces County, at least as long as I've been sheriff, when we looked at the poison pipeline headed for the distribution center that is Houston, Texas, Nueces County was just a pass-through. Nueces County was just 30 miles on Highway 77 where the human trafficking and the drug trafficking occurred. But now it's hitting us right between the eyes. It's hitting home with our young people. And we don't see an end in sight. Something has to be done at that border. And it's not just out in public. I was telling the governor that my most recent death inside my jail, and every sheriff in here, their biggest heartache, the reason they wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning is because of their county jail. And now we're seeing fentanyl inside the county jails, and it comes in as easily as sprinkling some liquefied fentanyl on paper. And it's extremely difficult to detect. And so now we're spending money on technology to try to address that issue. But fentanyl is everywhere, and it starts at the border. And I greatly appreciate everything you and my fellow sheriffs have done, especially with the collaborations and the coalitions like the Operation Lone Star operation. We're working hard on it, and we'd like the public to know that, but it's got to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed by the governmental agency that's responsible for it, and that's the federal. That's the United States government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now, Sheriff Ray Dalbosky.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all law enforcement chiefs, officials. I want to say one thing. Not only has Governor Abbott been pushing to secure the border, but also has been constantly searching for resources for rural counties like mine, like Zapata County. He has provided us with resources, equipment that has helped us and empowered us to continue doing our job. Governor Greg Abbott stepped up to the plate when no one did. He has heard the voice of the small rural counties, like I said. These communities have been unheard and unseen for many years. He's visited our counties around the border to try to help us, and is helping us and listening to our concerns. This thanks to the governor because he did not hesitate to provide the help. He's never hesitated to take a phone call or listen to our concerns and listen to the people. Governor Abbott is here to help us and all the Texas border sheriffs to keep Texas safe. It is not a red issue. It is not a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. And we're all Americans. We all took an oath as sheriffs and law enforcement. And it only happens when you have a leader like Greg Abbott. Governor Abbott is that leader with a stern character that not too many people like. But he has kept his word. And he has helped us, the Texas border sheriffs, secure the border. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And now Sheriff Roy Boyd.
Thank you, Governor. When I came into office at the beginning of last year, Governor, what we found was Goliad County, a small county of 7,400 people, was being overrun by cartel members and their operatives who were using property without the permission of the landowners to stash illegal aliens, strip stolen vehicles, and to conduct criminal activity. In the small jurisdictions where we only have 1 to 2 deputies working at any given time, this is an overwhelming task. We were in constant pursuits. We were monitoring 16 different known stash sites inside of Goliad County, and we were doing everything we could to keep up with the demands that have been brought on us as a result of Biden's open border policies. We were drowning. We were drowning in work, and we could not keep up until Governor Abbott stepped up and provided us with Operation Lone Star funding. That funding gave us the personnel, gave us the overtime, gave us the equipment to be able to go out and proactively fight the cartels and their operatives right in our jurisdictions. So we took that funding you gave us, Governor. We formed Operation Lone Star Task Force. We have 20 local law enforcement agencies. We're taking the money that you have entrusted to us to do the job that needs to be done because the federal government will not do it. And we are working together in a collaborative. And the men and women you see in this room are part of that. And they are working very hard. And as a result, and you and I have spoken about this before, we have changed the way that the cartels are operating. We've identified 4 major trafficking organizations. We've gone after 2 different cartels, and we're dismantling their operations right here in South Texas. We're working together thanks to your funding. Without your leadership and the funding that you have provided us, none of this would be possible. And the constitutional rights of the citizens of our communities would still be violated as a direct result of the federal government's lack of willingness to do their own job. And so we thank you, because it's only because of you that people can freely utilize their property in Goliad County without fear of the cartel being in the brush or coming to their house. It's only because of Operation Lone Star, and that's because of your leadership, because without it, there's no way it would be happening, and we'd still be drowning. You threw us the lifeline that helped keep us from drowning in what we were facing. Thank you, Governor, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheriff.